What's up everybody, Joseph Hadaway here. Starting off this video with another, lukewarm at best take? MLMs are bad. Yeah, I bet you've never heard that from a personal finance content creator before. Revolutionary, right? Well, I wanted to prove this theory. I wanted to see behind the scenes, from the front lines, what one of these MLMs is like. So I snuck into a life insurance MLM convention a couple hours down the road from my house. Well, I say snuck in, but the truth is I was invited by a friend who thought my financial background would make me more keen to sign up for the MLM. I don't know, but I got a front row peek at their business model, their recruiting tactics, everything they do, and I want to talk about it because it was a very interesting experience, let me say. Let's get into it. So let's go and get a couple things out of the way. I will not be revealing the name of the MLM that I went to this convention to. It's probably fair use. It would probably be fine for me to use their name and logo, but that sounds like a whole can of worms that I don't think is really worth it to open. That said, basically all these MLMs across basically every industry use very, very similar, if not the exact same recruiting tactics. So you wouldn't get any more by me mentioning the name of the MLM versus not. It applies to basically everything. Number two, I unfortunately do not have any photos or videos from the event. They had a pretty strict no cell phones policy, and I really didn't want to draw any attention to myself. Getting into the event itself, it was in a small hotel meeting room about 2 hours away from me. They somehow crammed 80, 90 of us in there, and I really don't know how. They probably didn't call the fire marshal first, because I feel like he probably would have shut that down. And like I said, I was invited by a friend who recently signed up for it. And before anything is said, I've made my protest on this company clear to said friend, but at the end of the day, they are an adult who are going to do whatever they want to do. I can't change that. It's up to them to decide for themselves, or I should rather say, find out for themselves. Getting into it a little more, when I was pitched the idea of this, or I was asked to come along, I was told it was a conference, and I got there and it was actually a boot camp is what they called it, which was a fancy way of saying we had a good 5.5 hours of straight information in front of us with 2 10-minute breaks. So with that said, the breaks kind of broke it up into 3 different sections, which is also how they did the itinerary for the event. So I'm going to go section by section and kind of tell you what happened and what I learned from this. And make sure to watch until the end of the video. Alright, so we are talking MLMs. I have someone who got into one of these MLMs a few years back and eventually got out, and we're going to talk about what it was like working in one of these MLMs rather than just attending a boot camp. So with that said, let's get into section 1. But before we get into that, let's talk about how you can take a little work off your plate. Whether you're looking for leads, want to start a blog, or just need some general help getting your business off the ground or day-to-day operations, a freelancer can help. And that's where Fiverr comes in. You've all watched the channel, you know that I love Fiverr, and Fiverr remains the best platform to find a freelancer to help you grow and run your business. On Fiverr, you have thousands of freelancers offering hundreds of thousands of gigs all at your disposal on one easy, simple to use platform. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Fiverr today using my link in the description and find a freelancer to take a little bit of work off your plate. Now, let's get back into part 1. Alright, so getting into the meeting, we were greeted outside by several people, all super hyped and full of energy, way more hyped than they probably should have been for a hotel conference room in the middle of nowhere at like 7 a.m. on a Saturday. But that's up to them. They shuffle us all in and we sit down, and a guy comes up to the podium at the front, a guy who I can really only describe as the hype man for the meeting, because that is exactly what he was. He gets in front of the podium, gets everyone's attention, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, "Good morning, who is ready to make some money?" And let me tell you, that really set the tone for the rest of the meeting. Next thing they did was kind of a meet and greet activity, I'll say. There was 80, 90 of us in the room, and they asked first who has been at the company 2, 3 years or longer. And maybe 10, 15 of the 80, 90 people stood up, and they said, okay, who has been here 90 days or less? Everybody else. There was no in between. And I'm not exaggerating, I mean literally no hands, nobody stood up, nothing. It's kind of like you either lose enough money in 3 months that you figure it out, or you go on to succeed. But we'll get into success rates later in the video, because spoiler alert, 90+% of people do not succeed in these MLMs. Next thing they did is they called out what they called the ring earners. people who had made $100,000 or more in a year. Again, the exact same 10, 15 people who'd been like there 3 years or more stood up. The room lost it for these people, and I'm still not entirely sure why, but if you hadn't picked it up yet, there was a tone to this whole meeting, and it was all, this is how much money you can make. That was the only thing we were going to talk about the entire day, and the tone was being set early. Next speaker came up, and he immediately started talking about the CEO's book that he had written, and I believe self-published. I'm not 100% sure on that, and honestly, I didn't fact check it because I really don't care. So Mr. MLM CEO had written a book on how to sell literally anything, and I bought and read the book prior to this video, and let me tell you, it's exactly what you'd expect to hear from an MLM CEO. And you know what? I'm going to spoil the book for you right now. Here are your 8 steps to sell literally anything. Number 1, you can't sell anything you don't believe in. Basically, the point of that chapter was telling you if you get involved in his MLM, buy the product. That way, if someone asks about an insurance policy, you can show them yours. And that's a common theme you'll see in every MLM. Every MLM encourages its sellers, agents, whatever they call you, to purchase and use the product. Number 2, you always got to grind, got to keep grinding. Number 3, listen to podcasts, kind of a never stop learning. Number 4, read for at least 15 minutes a day. Number 5, attend all meetings for this MLM company. Heavily implied throughout the entire meeting that if you miss even one weekly meeting, you're screwed forever. Sorry, that's it. All she wrote. Bye. Number 6, you have to be teachable. And the speaker kind of went on a tangent with this one, and he had a quote that I really felt the need to point out. He said multiple times that you, as an individual, can just decide to make $100K. So if you're making less than 6 figures, it's a choice, according to this speaker guy at least. I didn't really see that in the book, so I'm not going to call the CEO out for that, but I also don't think it's a far leap based on what was in the book. Number 7, you got to be accountable for your actions. And number 8, you always have to have a positive attitude. So then here's where we are, 2 hours in, a cult-like group worshiping money and potentially the CEO. That book, in my opinion, was if your average Twitter guru wrote and published a book. And this whole event was quickly turning into Twitter Guru Live. And just like that, we got our first 10-minute break where nothing really of note happened. So let's go ahead and jump into part 2. For part 2, on the agenda, we were told we'd be covering the product lineup of the MLM company. And that wasn't entirely a lie. The first person came up and discussed the differences between term and whole life. Nothing she said was wrong, but I gotta say it was a very high-level overview. We'll talk life insurance in a later video. I have a whole blog post on whole and term life that I'll put down in the video description below. But the basic of it is just know that I only carry term insurance on myself, and I recommend you do the same. So after the whole and term talk, we got into the part that I was the most excited for. IULs and annuities. I took a lot of notes on this part, but the video is already getting a little long as it is, so I'm going to condense it quite a bit. The main point that I want to pick on is the fear-mongering tactics they use to sell IULs, which, surprise, surprise, are all 401k and stock market bashing. Shocking, I know. I'll give you a second to take that one in. All right, second's over. And I want to note also, they didn't really talk about annuity sales, and specifically, and I quote on this one because everyone knows what an annuity is. That said, let's fearmonger some IULs. What do you say? First off, she drew a chart on the whiteboard that kind of looked like this, saying this is what the stock market does every week, month, day, year, whatever. I'm not going to comment on this, but Sammy, if you could please overlay a historical return chart of the S&P 500, and let's just see if they match. Number 2, we were told multiple times in no uncertain terms that 401ks and IRAs were essentially just gambling. Basically the same as playing blackjack or slots. And the question we were told to ask potential IUL buyers was, how much of your money saved for retirement are you comfortable losing? Which, if you're this far into a personal finance video on a personal finance channel, you know why that's wrong. Number 3, and lastly, this was my favorite quote of the entire session, And I can't get over it, and I still laugh about it. She said, and I quote, "What if the market decides to drop 20% tomorrow? And tomorrow is the day that you retire. Then what? You're out 20% of your retirement savings." I had to excuse myself from the room because I was laughing so hard. That is just not how the stock market works. If I have to explain why that was wrong, please watch some of my other videos. Next up, we had another speaker come up before the next break. I don't have much to say about her. She was just someone who had supposedly been successful in the MLM and worked her way up from recruit to, I think they called an agency owner. Don't quote me on that. I want to say that's what they called, but supposedly she was pretty successful. I didn't catch her name at all, but they brought up a few times that she had an Instagram presence posting like travel and like flashy cards and things, which sure, I guess that's probably the best MLM recruitment tactic. But she just reiterated some of the talking points you'd heard earlier in the meeting. Basically, to be successful, you need to A, hustle and grind, B, put at least 40 hours a week into growing your business, which, by the way, if you signed up for the MLM, they were referring to this now as your business. Number 3, invest money into leads and ads. And number 4, show up to every meeting. And she specifically said several times how much money you could potentially make if you just put X dollars and X hours into leads and ads, which I thought was super interesting because you buy the leads and the ads from the MLM company themselves. And I can't exactly say why that didn't sit right with me, but it still doesn't as I'm like writing and telling this back now. And the whole time, of course, the speaker was throwing out numbers. You know, you can make $100K, $200K, $300K, $1 million a year. And at this point, someone in the back of the room, another newer person, stood up and was just crying as she said, "I feel like I'm in church." Now, I drugged my wife to this with me because I really, really didn't want to go alone. And as part of her coming with me, we had an agreement that when I made this video about it, I wasn't allowed to call it a cult. But after witnessing that, I'm breaking that promise. Most MLMs are kind of glorified cults, and this one was no exception. And that was the close of part 2. Now we're getting into part 3 of the meeting. The last, I remember if it was an hour and a half, 2 hours, does it really matter? It felt like 6 hours of the session that we had left. And let me tell you, part 3 was both the best and the worst part of it simultaneously. This time we had several different speakers, most of them being the ring bearers that I mentioned earlier in the video, so they could tell you all about how they reached the level of success they supposedly had. The first speaker to come up to the podium, I have no words. Like, I couldn't follow 90% of what he was talking about, and I really don't think he was talking about anything. I think he was just throwing out buzzwords. I'll give him this though, if you watch the last video, he'd make the perfect fake guru. The crowd was loving him, but he wasn't really saying anything. That said, I do have 2 direct quotes from him that I made it a point to put in my notes that I want to put out on this video. Number 1, everyone just wants to work for themselves. It's the only way to reach freedom. Okay, that one's, again, I'm gonna call it very Twitter guru-ish, but it's harmless in of itself. And number 2, college didn't teach me anything. College in the US today is just like communist Russia. He didn't elaborate on that at all, and let me tell you, I would kill to know what that means. I think it was kind of the just anti-college, therefore be self-employed kind of rhetoric that you see from a lot of gurus, but I really, writing this back, talking about it back, I think I'm more confused now than I was in the moment, now that I've had some time to think about it. Next guy came up, started to talk about how you properly recruit. I mean, this is an MLM after all. We were gonna get here eventually. Not much to say, it was all very stereotypical. If you think of an MLM meeting, this was probably exactly what you're thinking. They gave you the whole speech of, you know, you recruit 3 friends, and then they recruit 3 friends, and they recruit 3 friends, and then you get residuals off of whatever their friends are making. The whole song and dance we've all heard and seen 100,000 times. I did get a pretty good laugh out of one thing he said though. He gave us the ABCs of how to be successful in this life insurance MLM. Always be recruiting. And with that, he sat down and we were greeted with the last speaker of the event, who again I'm going to describe as another hype man at best, another ring earner, ring bearer. I don't really remember the exact term they used, but again, I don't think it matters that much. People who had supposedly been quite successful, or at least reasonably successful in the MLM. And once again, we got some great buzzwords thrown around, but no real substance. And it's another guy that I kind of wrote down some Twitter guru quotes that I really, really liked. Sell to eat, build to grow. 3K a month is nothing. 40K a month is easy. I don't care about being smart or successful, just rich. 500K a month isn't a big enough dream. And last comment on the whole meeting, at one point in part 3, the speaker kind of started asking where everybody came from and how they found the meeting. A lot of very specifically, who brought you here? And at one point, one guy in the back said that he had found the event on Eventbrite and just wandered in, so nobody brought him there. The speaker stood at the front of the room, pointed at Eventbrite guy, and just said dibs. And everyone was just okay with that. And that's another one of those things that, I don't know about you, it just did not sit right with me if it's this competitive of a nature. Which also kind of is a point on that. I mentioned I came there with a friend who told everyone he was trying to recruit me into it as well, even though I think deep down at least he knew it was a lost cause from day one. And everybody, I was stopped so many times, because I obviously haven't signed and won't be signing any paperwork for it, but so many people tried to recruit me away from my friend who had brought me there and to come under them instead. So it's a very dog-eat-dog world, I guess, in these MLM recruitments. And if you're into that, maybe you are, but it's not right for me. And I don't think you can call out corporate America, like basically all of the speakers did, for being too harsh if your own meeting are recruiting people that harshly and that possessively. That said, I have a friend who was involved in a very similar MLM for several years, and he made a little money, but eventually got out of it, and I asked him to come on the video, and he said yes, so let's hop into it. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard of Captain America, but today I got the next best thing. Sitting down today with Tom, the savings captain. How you doing, Tom?
Good, doing great, Joseph. I wouldn't say I'm the next best thing, but thanks for having me on.
Let's not say next best, let's say one above. All right, so we are talking MLMs. You reached out, had a actually positive experience with an MLM.
Uh-huh.
If you don't mind me asking, and you don't have to name drop them, what kind of MLM are we talking? Like, we selling insurance, investments, or are we talking more of like an Amway kind of thing?
Joseph, I will go ahead and name drop. I want to give full disclosure on MLMs. So I always tell people when people ask me, are MLMs a great thing to get into for a side hustle? And my answer is, for about 1% of people that go into an MLM, it's a great thing. The other 99%, it's not. And I'll explain more to you on that. But the MLM I got involved with was well over 10 years ago. It was a company called Isogenics that sold like protein shakes, nutritional kind of stuff. I was brought in, like most people that join an MLM, they get introduced by, a friend or something, and you get signed up, and you go to all the rah-rah meetings. It just hit me at the right point in the right time. I think it was like a January of, maybe the year was 2012. In January, I was looking to, I want to drop a few pounds. I want to bring in some additional money. So it was like, coincidentally, that's how I ended up doing it.
I mean, hey, if it works, it works. So you said a friend drew you in.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, like you said, seems to be the story of every single MLM out there. So I'm just going to go ahead and go right into it. You were part of the 1%. What? Sorry, come here. Congrats. You're in the YouTube video now. Come here. Stop climbing on things. All right. So you were part of the 1% that made money. How was that? Through recruiting? Were you just really good at sales? What?
So the only way I think you really can make money in an MLM, you have to be good at recruiting, like you said. You have to be good at sales. And I think what most people fail, and ultimately why I got out of it, was it's a never ending. You're basically not just sales. You're a sales manager. That's the trick, and that's why most people fail. You can't possibly make money in an MLM just buying the stuff and consuming it yourself, or just using, you know, like your 10 your 10 best friends and family to buy the stuff. It is, if you think about it, an MLM is using you as a distributor for all their marketing, right? You have to move the product, and you actually have to find other people to move the product. That's where MLM, at least the marketing part, gets its name. Guess what? You're the marketing department.
100% amen to that. I guess, you know, as a recruiter, and I'm guessing a pretty successful recruiter, where were you finding people? What kind of tactics were you using? And I guess number 3, what would you recommend people look out for?
So I think before a person ever gets involved in an MLM, there's a few things they should look at. I think what they should really do is, every MLM offers, don't get caught up too much in the compensation model. Most of them have like this org chart structure. You're here, you sign people up, they go below you, sell enough points, you make this much money. Sure, look at that. But the thing they should look at is something called like an income. It'll be something like a distributor income disclosure. And that's where I get the 99% figure. If you go through that, they will break it down by the number of distributors they have, and at each income level, how much they're making. And you can pretty much pinpoint, it's in that 98 to 99% of money. People make less than $1,000 per year.
There it is.
That's the proof in the pudding. So that's the first thing I look at. I think there's a couple of other considerations before you sign up for an MLM. You think about it, you're building a business, which, you have some control over it, how much time and effort you want to put into it. You're doing all the right things, motivating people. But the company that you're selling for, a lot of these MLMs, let's face it, they go out of business. Or their product acceptance changes. So you run the risk of, do you really want to pour a year, 2 years into something, and then it, you know, through no fault of your own, it's just not a successful model, then your whole funnel dries up. So those are like, on the front end, that's what I would consider. Those are the things I would consider. And I don't think I really appreciated those 2 items on the front end. I'd like to sit here and say, yeah, Joseph, that's exactly what I, and no, I think I came to understand that like once I got into it. But I can confidently say MLMs will not work for most people. I just showed you the math. That's the math behind it. The psychology behind it is very few people have the time, you know, or the temperament to really be successful to what you need to do.
100% agree. And I like that you brought up the income point, because that one, okay, don't lick my face. At the conference that I was dragged to, that was the only recruiting tactic they used at all, is if you do this, you could make this much money. That was the only thing they were bringing to the table. And at this point, we're selling IULs and life insurance too, which are a whole nother ball game in and of itself, a whole nother problem, even when we talk, you know, the IUL space in the MLM, if you don't mind me asking.
No, absolutely. So I can give you a little bit more my personal experience with college. I went into it gangbusters. Usually when I start something, I usually go all in or not at all on anything I do. And this was no different. Ended up feeling better, losing weight. It did its work. So I'd say after about 30 days, I think I had really signed up my first people. I did this through online, a little bit like social media or LinkedIn. That was one aspect of it. And I would get home from work, my 9 to 5, and this was my night job. I've always had like a side gig going on. Like I did my MBA while I was working. I got my CFP while I was working. And then I think, I probably had a year or two where I was only doing my 9 to 5. And I was like, I need something else to do. I was feeling lazy. So I took this on. I'm not kidding you. It was a lot of work. My nights entailed, it's hard to think of it now, calling people up. I don't remember where I would get these leads. Like one thing would lead to another. So there was some like digital and some old school marketing. I fell into the isogenics thing, and this was a little bit of a stroke of luck. The person that signed me up was pretty good friends with one of the top distributors in the whole country for isogenics. So kind of where that helped me was, they were $1 million producer. They earned, $1 million plus a year selling this stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were like usually one of the top 3 people in the country. And that person just happened to live like within 5 miles from me. So they would always put events on at like their country club. And then I was able to invite people in. So that gave me, that was just luck. Sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. But by 30 or 60 days in, I can't remember because it's been 10 plus years, I was excited. I made my first sales. They call it, the buzzword is downline. My downline was...
There it is.
That's to where you got to grow your downline. That was growing. So then fast forward the next 30 or so days, then I'm reaching out to, the MLM space was different. At least this was my experience. When you were talking to people about an MLM, you were often approaching people that were also in another MLM. And the interesting thing was, think about 2 animals out in the wild. They meet. They're looking at each other, and you're each one another's lunch, basically. They're hoping to sign you up, and you're hoping to sign them up. And you're just saying, "Hey, I've got the better income plan than your MLM." So there's a little bit of that kind of, horse trading that goes on, so to speak. But I'll tell you, I got hooked after it was at least 3 months. Well, then I started making $100 a week. And I'm like, hey, this isn't bad. I mean, break it down by the hour. It's not even minimum wage. And then Joseph, there it was, that first check with commas, as they like to call it, came in, an $1,100 or $1,200 check. And I think that was the most I made in a week. But after that, it was pretty consistent, $300, $400, $500. So that kind of gave me the fever. So I definitely know it was in less than 6 months, I beat the odds.
Which I was telling Tom this before we hit record, but I will say this. When I put out an all call, I was kind of looking for someone who'd been in MLM, and I was not expecting to find someone who had been in one and made money. So, Tom, I do really appreciate it. And this is not the end. I'm not trying to wrap anything up here. I'm just getting this line in there because this is not the perspective I expected. But I know the people who do succeed in the MLMs, they, especially inside the MLM, they get pushed. And the MLM wants everybody to see, hey, this guy made money, so therefore you can too. But I like how you're being the realistic on, but I beat the odds.
Yeah, just keeping it real. And I'll put this out there too. If you're looking for any other possible side hustle that may have existed in the last 30 years, you could probably reach out to me. I've probably done it, tried it, or considered it at one point. But, I got out of it because the reason I stopped doing it was it is a nonstop pipeline. It's a nonstop pipeline because you're adding people into your downline, and then it just becomes exponential. If they're not signing people up, it's a continual amount of management that you've got to do to continue to do it. And you just hit that, you just hit that line on the curve where you can only put so much time into it. You either have to, in my opinion, stop your 9 to 5 and do it full time if you want to take it any further. And I just wasn't ready to do that. But that was the only way I made it work. And I'll tell you what, without being that inventive, Joseph, I really don't see how I would have made money in 90 days or less.
So I wanted to ask this. So, and I guess disclaimer, I'm sure every MLM is different, but did you ever let me start here. Were there like weekly meetings in Isogenics, or you kind of signed up and went on your way?
I would not call them weekly meetings. I would call them more pep rallies.
I can respect that. And how do those pep rallies go on average? Because I'd like to compare your experience to mine here.
Joseph, how are you doing? It's a great day. We have got such a great opportunity in front of us. There are so many people looking for you. The opportunity is we just got to go find them. This is the best way to get people to live better and also make money that they need. Warren Buffett has called this the best way for people to make money. And, you know, I'm going to remember that quote from Warren Buffett, but those were the kind of things I heard him say.
That sounds exactly right. And one thing I also wanted to ask is I kind of got at the they called it a boot camp that I went to, which was 5.5 hours straight of what Tom just did. Do you ever feel like a little bit of like a cult mentality?
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Which it's another good thing I always describe. I guess a cult isn't a bad thing until it actually collapses, like Jamestown or something like that. You know, it's pretty bad, and that's exactly what it's like. It's very cult-like, yeah, very cult-like. And the thing is, if you're not going to make it money. You embody some of that cultishness too. So you have to think of, where am I going to trade off? You do have to buy in. But what I think I was trying to say was, most people are not going to make money in it. Just know the numbers going in. I'm very upfront with that. I'm not saying you can't do it. You can do it, but know what you're up against, know what the odds are. Like when I tell a young investor how to invest, I say I can guarantee you're going to make money over your lifetime if you buy in. I can't if you short-term trade stocks. You know, I think you have to flip the odds over with MLM. You're almost not guaranteed not going to make money, but you can.
And I'm probably repeating some because, hey, spoiler alert, when Tom and I are recording this, I have not finished writing or even started recording the video yet. So if I'm repeating things, either way, that said, yeah, because I know it was 80, 90 people of us in a hotel conference room. And there was like 10 people there who'd been in the company and they were like the 6-figure earners. Everybody else had been there less than 3 months and not one of them had made a penny. So it's kind of, you know, just interesting to see that gap, you know? If even 10% of people make decent money off of it, what happens to the other 90%, excuse me.
It is. That's a good observation too, Joseph. That's probably a good breakdown of how most of their population is. The first 90 days, 6 months, a lot of activity, then they don't make any money. Then the distributors go inactive, and then only a few make it. What were they? Do you remember what they were? What was the pitch or sign up for you? How much money did they want you to lay down, or how did that go?
So they didn't talk about that at all. It was, like I said, 5.5 hours each session, because it was total of 3 sessions. In 5.5 hours, we got 2 5-minute breaks. So yeah, that's something. And each session had between 3 and 5 speakers, and each speaker would just get up there and say, you can make 6 figures, or you can make $1 million if you just sign up today. That was the extent of the discussion. But they talked a lot. I mean, they would talk about things you have to pay for, like you have to pay for your insurance license, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for your own leads. And they talked a lot about, you will do better if you put more money into this, almost pitching like a guaranteed return. But numbers specific, this is what you should be spending, were never discussed, unless I think they had one woman up there who said she was spending like $6,000 or $7,000 a month on leads, but she was making $20,000 a month. That was the only numbers spending that were ever solidly discussed.
Or at least alluded to.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, actually, I do want to ask you about that, because we're kind of on topic with that. Were you encouraged to buy like X amount of the product or use it yourself? To go on the insurance talk, they would always say, you have no right selling this if you don't have your own policy in place. Which, they had a lot of people of all age groups and all family sizes, and whole life wasn't for most of them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joseph. And that's another important factor for a potential screen for any MLM that you sign up for, because you almost certainly are going to have to buy a product. I think there's only a couple that you don't. Pampered Chef might be one that comes to mind. Going to require that you buy a minimum amount of product, right? To be like, you can distribute $100,000 worth of stuff, but if you don't buy your $200 stuff a month, you're considered inactive. So yeah, you're going to have to jump that hurdle. Another thing that I was also thinking about related to that, marketing. You're doing your own marketing. They should call it uni-level marketing, really. There's no multi, it's you. It's you're doing the marketing. What I mean by that is, obviously there's no TV commercials, no brand awareness on social media. Like, you have to buy marketing material. So if you want 100 brochures to give out at some event, well, yeah, you're going to buy that from the company at $15 a case. So the company is not investing in anything for your marketing other than coming up with the materials. You got to provision everything. And then another cost that people are not aware of, they do give you a website that they're fulfilling orders from. And it's just, I mean, all it is, it's, it would be Isogenics at Joseph Hadaway or something. It's a very unique page. It's the same information. Maybe you can uniquely put something about you on there. And then when an order gets placed, the person's going to your page, but you're paying for that. You're paying, $59 a year or something just for that website page. So there's a lot of nickel and dime expenses to just overcome becoming cash flow positive.
I like that you mentioned the website, because I do want to bring this up. That was discussed. Now that you mentioned cost, they charge $300 a month for the website. And again, this is an insurance company, so all it really is a glorified landing page to a Calendly link. And that it includes domain name and the web design for the page, which is probably all a cookie cutter website for the most part, isn't it? That is word for word what I was getting ready to say. It is. You look at it and you can choose like 3 colors. They put your name in the top right, and I think you're allowed to put a photo or 2 of yourself on there, and that's it. $300 a month. And like I've been pretty open about this. I have a web design agency that hosts and does my website for me. And I've got custom code, custom site for way less than $300 a month. So, and one more thing you did mention, the recurring inventory, you're putting $100, $200 a month into something that you are 99% likely, I guess, to, not make that money back. Ridiculous trade-off. Yeah, absolutely. That's why for Isogenics at the time, I was comfortable because maybe I was putting $200 a month into it. So I satisfied their minimum personal purchase requirement, but it was stuff I was, actually consuming myself. But that said, to start winding this down, Tom, I really appreciate you coming on the video. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you. Hopefully we can salvage at least some of this now that somebody's being a little more quiet. Show your face to the camera. Let them know what you've done. And I will say, if you won't subscribe for me, subscribe for Maggie. She'll appreciate it. Either way, Tom, again, really appreciate you coming on. Where can we find you online? Where can you connect with Tom? Absolutely. So, you can follow me on Twitter, on X at Savings Captain. And then I'm also active in the podcast space with Money Happy Hour podcast, which I feature I feature usually a weekly interview every Monday from an investor, and just started an intermittent series on the Money Happy Hour called Money Happy Hour. Get this, Joseph, shots. Get it? Like shot classes, something small. These are 10-minute episodes where I'm just going to go over maybe 2 or 3 personal investing, stock things,
share what the headline is, but go a little bit more deeper than the typical bubblegum news, and just spend a couple minutes, give my editorial opinion, and ask people for theirs.
Well, hey, love to hear. That's actually not even out of something. Actually, that's very unique. I know a couple other podcasts have done similar things, but I think most of them have kind of phased out of it. So that's how I got into podcasting. And hey, if nothing else, I'll be your first customer. And I'll link down to everything, Tom, in the video description below. And once again, thank you so much, Tom, the Savings Captain, for coming to chat with me.
Yeah, I'm maybe I'll sign up for my MLM again. I'll send you my link to my website. You've motivated me, Joseph. Thanks a lot for everything.
I gotta say, after sitting through this whole boot camp, I see how and why people fall into these MLM traps. The message and the sales pitch is refined and it's strong. If you're down on your luck or just looking for a way to improve your and your family situation, and somebody walks in and says, hey, you can make 10K, 20K, 30K a month, some obscene amount of money that'll change basically everyone but Bill Gates and Elon Musk's life, it sounds really, really attractive. And you tell people they can be self-employed while they do it, and that they can make as much money as they possibly want as long as they're willing to put time and money into it. It sounds like a no-brainer when you pitch it that way. And I know I've said a lot in this video, and I want to make one position extremely clear. Anyone who falls into these MLMs is not a bad person at all. They are just doing what they think is best for their situation and their family. They too fell for a sales pitch and drank the Kool-Aid. They're just doing as they were taught. The real villain in this are these MLM companies who use these scummy tactics, who use these near guaranteed rates of failure and use these way inflated sales pitches to recruit innocent people into what is basically a guarantee of failure with, again, 90+% of people in every single MLM across the board failing within their first year or losing money. Very, very few people make it out on top. But of course, they don't care how much money people lose and how many people get hurt as long as their bottom line is growing. People are numbers, not people. That all said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, let me know. I see similar MLM conferences around my town all the time. I could attend a few more and talk about them. This could really become a full series. So that said, make sure you subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media, and always be Cruton.